This is a story from when I was in college. During my senior year, I was 21, and my friends and I would all go to the popular bars in town. The college town was what I would describe as pretty standard. I'm a female, and I lived in a house with my roommate Rebecca. The house was not very big, but it was better than living in the dorms or even having an apartment. We had a small yard and many neighbors on each side. It was also still close to the campus as well as the town. One weekend, some friends and I made plans to go out to one of the bars that night. Usually Rebecca would go out with me, but she was back home for the weekend. A couple of us got a ride from our friend Jason, and we arrived at the first bar. It was a popular one, and it was really busy. This was common, especially during the school year. Hundreds of students would go out every weekend, and soon the bar was too crowded for our liking. There was barely any room to move around. I was there with 3 friends, and we got sort of split up when getting drinks because of the crowd. There was this one guy that approached me then. He didn't really say much but immediately tried grabbing me, and I moved away quickly. The guy just looked like a creep in general. Very shortly after that, I found my friends again, and we left that bar. Sometimes things got crazy there, and that was fine because we could just go to another one. We left and walked a few blocks to another bar that we had been to before. There were still a lot of people at this one too, but not nearly as bad as the previous bar. This one we had a good time at and spent several hours there. It was not my idea, but one of my friends wanted to leave that bar for yet another one later on in the night. By now, things were getting really late. When we arrived at the third bar, things were a little bit quieter. There was still a decent amount of people though. Now, as we were at that bar, that's when I noticed the guy again. It was the same man that had tried to grab me earlier, and he seemed like an overall creep. He was standing across at the other side of the bar, but he was just staring at me. He had sort of a disturbing grin on his face. I pointed him out to my friends. The man went over and sat down by himself at a table and continued to stare at me. I ignored this for a while, but a short time later, we decided to leave because of how strange this was. We walked a few blocks to another bar that wasn't that far away. I didn't notice the man following us or anything like that, which was good. We spent the rest of the night at this bar. We were there for maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and then called our friend Jason to see if he could drive us back. As we were waiting for Jason and still inside the bar, that same guy walked in. I was really glad that we were leaving and going home soon. I had no idea who this man was and why he seemed to be following me. There were hundreds of people out that night. Why he seemed so fixated on me, I didn't know. The man started walking over to me, and I immediately left and walked outside with my friends. The man was sort of tall, thin, and had darker colored hair. Thankfully, Jason arrived just about a minute later. The man was standing outside, like 25 feet away or so. We got inside Jason's car, and the man waved at me as I got inside. I was glad that I wouldn't have to see him again. Jason drove us back and dropped me off at my place first. I got into our house and walked up and unlocked the door. I closed it and locked it behind me, and then I went inside and started to get ready for bed pretty much right away. By then, it was after 2:00 in the morning. I went upstairs to my bedroom, and almost as soon as I had gotten inside, I heard a noise from downstairs. At first, I didn't know what it was at all. I opened my bedroom door to listen. I heard it again. Somebody was knocking on the back door of our house. I got a really bad feeling right away. I left my bedroom and walked downstairs. As I was walking down, the person knocked again. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I went over to the living room and looked. Right away, I saw the guy again. He was looking in the window of the back door, right at me. As he looked at me, he smiled and knocked yet again. I ran away out of sight, and I yelled that I was calling the police. This didn't seem to deter him, and he knocked once more. He just kept knocking over and over for like 5 minutes straight. I did, in fact, call the police. I was really nervous that the man would try and break in, but he didn't. Shortly after I got off the phone with the police, the man stopped knocking. They got there and looked around the yard, but I guess the man had left. This was disappointing to me because I was afraid that the guy would come back. Police stayed for a while and then left, telling me not to hesitate to call again if the man did return. Then they drove off, and I went up to try and get some sleep. I checked all around the house by looking out the windows from the inside before going to bed. Everything seemed fine. I double-checked the locks, and then I went upstairs, got in bed, and closed my eyes. Despite being sort of scared and worried, I was still really tired and found myself drifting off to sleep rather quickly. That didn't last very long, though. Once again, I heard a knocking at the back door. He was back. I did just as the police had told me, and I called them right away after hearing the knocking again. Luckily, the police weren't too far away. They arrived at my house much faster this time. The man knocked several more times, and the police got there just as he was still knocking at my back door. When the police got there, the man tried to run from them, but he was caught without getting very far. I work at and own a bar in the city that I live in. It's a somewhat small town, but has a cool little downtown area. I've owned the bar for 4 years now, and this is something that happened not too long after I first opened it. The first year or so, the business was a little bit slow. My bar wasn't as well known because it was new. The weekends would usually be pretty good, and I would get a decent amount of customers, but on weeknights it could get pretty slow sometimes. We didn't have food, and we were just a bar with drinks, so during the week I would often be the only one working. I remember one night, things were really quiet. There were a few customers throughout the night, but when it got late, things really died down. For the last couple of hours that my bar was open, nobody came inside at all. Then came about an hour before closing. I heard the door open and saw somebody walking inside. My bar is not all that big, it's mostly just the seats at the bar, a pool table, some darts, and a couple of high tables to sit at. A man walked inside and then immediately sat down in the corner at one of the high tables. He faced away from me. As he sat there, I said hi to him from the bar. The man did not answer me. From what I remember, the guy was kind of short and was wearing a hat. I never really got a look at his face though, because he came in so fast and then turned away from me almost immediately. The man was just sitting there, facing away from me, and didn't really seem to be doing anything. I stayed where I was behind the bar and just waited there. The guy didn't seem to have any interest in getting anything, and I kind of wondered what he was doing here. I let him be though, and minded my own business. When it got to be 30 minutes until close, the man was still there. I decided to let him know that I would be closing the bar in the next 30 minutes. I said it loud enough that I'm sure he would hear me. He didn't even bother to turn around though. He just kept sitting there. I just shook my head and then went into the small back room area that I had for a moment. I can't remember what I was getting or putting back, but I was in there for maybe 10 seconds or so. When I came back out, the man was gone. This was kind of a relief to me. The man had been sort of creeping me out. I had dealt with some strange people, obviously, but a situation like this had never come up before. Something about the guy was just off for sure. I didn't really know how to handle him, just sitting in the corner facing the wall and ignoring me. He hadn't been going on his phone or anything like that. From behind the bar, I finished cleaning some things up. It was apparent that nobody else was going to come into my bar for the night. And to be honest, I didn't want any business after this strange man. I decided to go over and lock the doors a bit early. I walked out from behind the bar and made it to the front door. Then I locked it. When I started walking back towards the bar, I suddenly saw the man again. He came out of seemingly nowhere, but I realized that he had been hiding behind the pool table. The man came charging at me like a crazy person. I did the only thing that came to mind, which was to quickly move to the right and get behind the bar. I ran around it and then jumped over to the other side. The man chased after me but did not jump over the bar as easily as I did. Then I ran to the back and went into the back room. We had a back door to the bar, and I ran for it and made it outside. When I got out there, the man was still inside my bar. I got out my phone and called the police. I remember that I stood around the back, kind of pacing around as I waited. The area that I was in was a back alley with a small parking lot in it. I was maybe 20 feet or so away from the back door, making sure the guy didn't come out. But about 5 minutes after calling the police, before they arrived, the man suddenly burst out the door in the back. At first, he was sprinting right towards me. I quickly ran around the alleyway, and the man ended up sprinting in the other direction. I went back inside my bar after that and locked the back door. When I got inside, my bar was all messed up. The man had smashed several bottles and knocked over chairs inside. The police arrived a short time later. Fortunately, other than losing a few bottles of alcohol, nothing else was really permanently damaged. Since then, there have been some other interesting moments in owning a bar, but that one will always stick out to me. This is something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I lived in a somewhat big city at the time and had an apartment that I lived in. I had a job that I worked during the week, and on weekends would occasionally go out to bars with friends. It was something that I did countless times, and it usually worked out in a similar way. I had a couple of different sort of friend groups, but the main one that I had was about 10 of us. Rarely would we all go out in the same night, but oftentimes at least 4 or 5 of us would. There were quite a few bars in town, and with friends I visited almost all of them. One night, several of my friends were going to one of the bars in town. How it would often go is I would walk to the bar and meet my friends there. My apartment was in the city and close enough to most of the locations to walk to. Sometimes I would even meet up with friends, and then we would walk together. So this night in particular, I walked to a bar that was maybe 15 minutes away. I met a few of my friends there, and we got a few drinks. I never liked to get crazy drunk, but I would have a few. That's why I would always walk to the bars and never drive. As this night went on, my friends and I walked to another bar down the street at probably about 9 or 10 p.m. We stayed at that bar for the rest of the night. It was a pretty typical night for us. Both bars were decently busy with it being a weekend, and everything seemed normal. At maybe like midnight, we left the bar to go our separate ways. I walked with one of my friends for several blocks, and then said bye and went on my way. I had to go about 10 minutes down one straight road, then turn. After my friend had turned at the street they had to, I walked for about 2 or 3 minutes, but heard somebody walking right behind me. I thought it was my friend still following me. I thought this because at the time of saying bye to them, it had just been the 2 of us on the sidewalk in the immediate area. I looked back to see who it was. There was a woman walking down the street. Immediately, she looked really strange. It looked as though she had painted her face as if it was Halloween, but it wasn't even close to Halloween. The way that she had painted it was very creepy. I turned back and kept walking home, hearing the woman behind me the entire time that I was on the street. After the longest time of that, it was finally time for me to take another street down to my apartment. I completely expected that this woman would keep walking, but she turned behind me. I was hoping that she would not follow me to my apartment building. A couple of more minutes went by, and I got even closer to my building. That's when, seemingly out of nowhere, the woman started walking much faster. It took me by surprise, and at first I was afraid that she was going for me. She quickly gained on me, and I turned around and stopped where I was. The woman was heading straight for me. That's when I moved off the sidewalk a little bit into the grass just off of it. The woman looked at me and then passed me by. I stood there, just watching her, very confused. After she made it past me, she kept walking very quickly up to my apartment building, which was now in sight. I was very concerned when I saw that's where she was going. I continued walking there though, hoping the woman would leave. When she reached the front doors though, she went inside the small entry. There was one set of doors, a small space, and then another set of doors that you needed a key for. The woman was not going into the area that required a key, she only went within the first set of doors. Then she turned around and faced me. I had already seen her face up close as she passed me by, and it was extremely scary looking. As she looked at me from behind the doors, she started to smile. It really freaked me out. She just stood there, right inside the doors, as if she was waiting for me. I got closer, but soon realized that she was not going to move. I couldn't go in there. Instead, I walked away, going in a different direction. I walked down the street and went all the way around the block. It took me maybe 10 more minutes. When I had returned, the woman was now gone. I was really glad to see that, and I wondered why she had been messing with me like that. I walked up to the front doors of my apartment building, and as I was going inside, I heard a noise. I looked over and saw the woman hiding behind a bush about 30 feet away. She emerged from it and started walking over to me. I hurried up and went inside and closed the locking door behind me. I went up to my apartment as fast as I could. After that night, I never saw the woman again.